Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly broadcast on things that matter to tech. I'm Jay Fidell.
And I'm Duke Oishi.
Hawaii is one of the healthiest places on Earth and has had one of the best health insurance systems on Earth. But we've suffered a doctor brain drain, and some of our most gifted doctors have left for the mainland.
The John A. Burns School of Medicine is the only medical school in our isolated state. And were it not for the efforts of certain committed leaders over the years, we wouldn't have that either.
Dr. Cadmen, in the paper today, the Star Bulletin, they talked about something that we've talked about before, namely the epiphany, the moment when this all became clear about what was needed, what was possible in Kakako. Can you tell our listeners about that?
I began interviewing in June of 1998, and they were talking about closing the medical school, but they were also talking about diversifying their economy. And one of the sectors was biotechnology. And I said, you couldn't import biotechnology. It's clustered around where the research is being done, primarily at research medical schools and private research institutes. And they called me back 6 months later, and they wanted me to do this project. Now, fast forward 2 years, 2000. The governor, Ben Cayetano, wanted me to meet him in Kaka'ako, and on the 10th floor of the Gold Bond building, and it's a corner conference room. He pointed out this 10-acre site, and I looked around, and this is where the biotech industry for the state will be nurtured, because the medical school will be the creation of the science for the biotechnology industry. There's 100 acres available currently. So it's a 2-building project, and it will be complete this time next year, and it's 335,000 square feet. The science building is 216,000 square feet. And the education building is 118,000 square feet. It's a $150 million project. It would be a wonderful concept to build the biotech industry in Kaka'ako.
As we founded, both faculty and students were optimistic and energetic, if not exuberant, about the school and its future. It is truly Hawaii's medical school.
The 64 students of the class of 2014 were selected from 1,600 applicants. That means more than 25 applicants for every seat. 90% of that class are Hawaii residents. The class that graduated this year had 12 Native Hawaiian students.
So we stopped by last week to walk around and say hi, and to see how things were going in the classrooms and laboratories, and to talk with the faculty, the students, the researchers, and the dean.
We met with Dr. Damon Sakai, a 1987 graduate of JABSOM and the Director of Medical Student Education in the Louis Lab. He told us about the Center for Clinical Skills and how JABSOM teaches medicine and bedside manner using both human and robotic patients in problem-based tutorials.
We recognize that there is an impending physician shortage nationally and in Hawaii. We want to respond to that. Many of our graduates stay in Hawaii. I would say a little more than half will stay here after graduating from medical school to do their residency training. Some will go for training opportunities that we don't have here in Hawaii, but many of them bring that knowledge back and practice in Hawaii when they've completed their training.
They're sharp, aren't they? They're the cream.
They are the cream of the crop, the best Hawaii has to offer.
So for every seat, how many applicants apply?
For
And can I
entering
apply?
class,
I'd like to apply.
You are welcome to apply.
Thank you.
We have anywhere from 1,600 to 1,900 applicants for our 64 slots.
Wow.
We're really focused on trying to get Hawaii-born students.
How about Neighbor Island? You know, there's always an issue, for example, on the Big Island about having enough physicians, especially specialists, who can serve the community there.
Some of the things that we're trying to do to address that would be we are developing a residency program in family medicine that is housed in Hilo.
That's great idea.
So we think a part of getting students to stay and practice in the neighbor islands is actually doing their training there, getting to know the community, being familiar with the neighborhoods and the people.
Sure. Now, in terms of faculty, how many faculty do you have?
Well, we have 250 faculty here at the School of Medicine full-time. We have about 1,100 volunteer faculty that do so much for our students and residents in the community.
So you're really connected with the community. This is a community kind of exchange on medicine.
Yes, this truly is a community medical school. We send our students to many of the hospitals and clinics. We work with our community physicians. They provide a tremendous amount of the education at our school.
How do you take an ordinary undergraduate, graduate person and make him into the kind of person that we entrust our lives to? What's the special sauce there?
The first 2 years is spent primarily in our what we call our problem-based learning curriculum. It's a unique, active learning method in small groups, and our students go through clinical cases and they learn the content of medicine by studying these clinical cases, both the basic sciences and the clinical sciences. They come to places like this clinical skills lab to learn how to do a physical exam. They go to our Center for Clinical Skills to practice talking with patients who volunteer for our patient program here at JABSOM. And we focus not only on the biological and clinical content of medicine, but also your bedside manner, communication skills, professionalism. Those are all things that are just as important
I agree.
in our curriculum as is the biological content of medicine.
Yeah.
They spend their last 2 years doing mostly clinical rotations. They're in hospitals and clinics. They learn the major disciplines like medicine and surgery and pediatrics and psychiatry, etc. In their 4th year, they select that specialty that they would like to continue their training in during their residency training experiences. I believe that the Johnny Burns School of Medicine will continue to build on its reputation of having innovative medical education, that we will be paying attention to the needs of the people in Hawaii, not only by increasing the number of graduates, but training our graduates to have the values that are important to our local community, but doctors who are professional, compassionate, kind, communicate well, and take care of the people of Hawaii with the kind of empathy and kindness that I think we would want to have for ourselves and our family.
Yes, we would. I would. I know everybody would. So that's a special benefit in our quality of life here in Hawaii. Thank you, Damon.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you. Then we checked in for a teaching tutorial with Dr. Ben Berg and some second-year students in the SimTiki Simulation Room, where the robots look, act, and sound like real patients. It was reminiscent of the House series on cable. They gave us a simulated heart attack, and it was quite exciting as the scenario unfolded.
This is a patient who's in the emergency room, and he's come in with chest pain, which means that he's possibly having a heart attack. Luella says maybe it's a lung problem. So a heart problem or a lung problem. So something else that could be part of what we call the differential diagnosis of the multiple things that are going on. And then how do we proceed? What are our priorities here? So airway, breathing, and circulation. Those are kind of the priorities that we think about in this situation. Before you even start thinking about what's the exact diagnosis, you want to think about, let me make a quick assessment and decide, is this patient stable or unstable? Great, so he's already got the EKG leads on. So he's got oxygen, monitoring, and an IV. So as we're moving to finish the evaluation of this patient, somebody should be thinking about getting an IV in place. You're starting to think about what medications might I give him. So morphine, oxygen, nitroglycerin, and aspirin. People get fixated on the data here, and that takes you away from the patient a little bit. Using simulators to practice procedures, practice cognitive processes, and thinking through problems has translated into dramatic improvements in performance. They're human patient simulators because they simulate all of the physiology that you guys saw there. They have heart rates, and you can feel pulses, and you can see them breathe and listen to them breathe. If you want to feel a pulse right now, you can feel right here, Jay. If you just push a finger there.
So what is that, 190 over 62?
At my age, that would be pretty bad.
It would be pretty bad.
Okay, so your blood pressure is 122 over 70.
Ooh. Yeah, why do you want to be a doctor anyway?
Well, you know, it's pretty funny. I've never wanted to do anything else. You know, when you're a little kid, you're like 5 years old, and you're like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a whatever. I always wanted to be a doctor, and it's never changed throughout all of high school and throughout all of college, and to here I am. I want to be here the rest of my life. And
Yeah, you're going to practice here.
yeah, hopefully between Waimea and Hau'ula, somewhere between there.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
That's
I'd
great.
love to, yeah.
They need you there, Reis.
Yeah, definitely.
So Tina, what have we got here? What do you see? This is a room which has actual paper on the window and the door, so it's not visible to the outside walkway. And it doesn't look like a room that the students would be in. It looks like a room maybe where the faculty is located.
You got it. And that can be faculty here at the medical school who you've met and spoken with, or it could be faculty who are non-compensated, who are volunteers, physicians who maybe went to this medical school, who come back to give back, but who have great knowledge. Each terminal that you see allows one of those faculty members or observers to watch exactly what happens as one of our student physicians walks into the exam room, greets a patient he or she has never met before. It's a make-believe encounter between a physician and a doctor, the kind of thing that might happen in a real clinic, in a real hospital. In this case, it feels even more intense than make-believe because the faculty are watching as this unfolds. The cameras are recording as this unfolds. But all the student and the patient have in that room are each other. And it is key that they communicate. It's key that the physician asks the right questions to zero in on a diagnosis, or at least a beginning of a diagnosis, how to help this person. Physicians may only have 15 minutes with a patient. They've got to use those 15 minutes to try and ask all the right questions to zero in on what could really be the problem. Take all the right measurements, whether it be blood pressure or look into our eyes or take that little hammer and tap on our knee. All of that information is being evaluated in this encounter between student and patient. And all of it is very important that it not only be correct for a scientific basis, but that it be conducted in a way that shows respect for the patient, shows eye contact, shows bedside manner. All right, Jay. This is where the door's going to be closed. The student's going to knock on the door, grab that chart, walk in, and greet the patient. The patient, who's a schooled volunteer, is going to be probably sitting on the exam table. From here, the student and the patient will interact. The scenario that happens in this room at this time is different every time. It could be a very easy to diagnose problem, or it could be a hidden problem. And the student nonetheless has to figure it out. And if they learn nothing else, what they learn is all things are possible. I can't zero in on just one idea until I know scientifically that that's what's wrong. When our students leave these premises, and when they leave our hospital partners after learning at the 3rd and 4th years in our hospitals, no one's going to be watching them and guiding everything they do. They're going to need to do it on their own. So this is a safe environment for them to begin to experience that independence, while at the same time they can look at the videotape later and say, oh my gosh, I looked at the chart the whole time, I never made eye contact with the patient. The students who come to us already have their bachelor's degrees. Many of them already have master's degrees. These are people who know organic chemistry. These are really smart people. But in this room, they also have to suddenly have a personality. They have to be curious. They have to communicate. This is where they learn that.
We also spoke with two of the graduate medical students who were doing research in Abby Collier's laboratory to see what they were doing among all the boiling beakers, test tubes, and expensive equipment. We found they weren't mad scientists at all.
My name is Brittany Sato, and I'm a third-year graduate student in Dr. Abby Collier's lab. And my work is dealing with endocrine disruptors and their effects on pregnancy by altering steroidogenesis in the placenta.
I'm John Miyagi, graduate of Iolani School, and I'm on my last year of the PhD program here at the School of Medicine. And I'm studying obesity in kids and how it can affect drug metabolism and how it can lead to adverse drug reactions.
So I'll just be staining some slices of placenta. It involves an incubation. So first I'm going to circle on the slide where I'm going to be putting my stain for the tissue, and then I'll be adding the stain. Trying to get it within that marking on the wax pen. Okay. Now we're just gonna have it go into the fixing solution here. And so whatever tissue picks up the stain will retain the purple coloring. That's it. And so we incubate it for an hour, and then we have a series of different solutions in which we help to visualize the tissue damage within the placenta.
So how is this different from making Jell-O?
A little bit more complicated. It requires a little bit more toxic chemicals than Jell-O, and you don't want to be eating this stuff.
So what I'm doing here is I'm actually running an enzyme assay. Doesn't look like much, but in each of these different wells there's a different sample. And I'm adding this red solution, which is actually metabolized by my liver samples in each well. And when then I add them in, I get like a change of color, and I can measure that in a machine that we have. And when we do this, we can measure out the rates of reaction that are going on, and then we can calculate how this goes on in the human body. So from here, what we actually can do is scale up from what we have in in vitro or in a test tube setting and see how it models in humans. And what I'm trying to do by this is seeing how obesity in children can affect a child's ability to metabolize drugs, whether it's aspirin or an antibiotic. And right now people don't really have an idea, and we're trying to figure that out right now.
Continuing our tour, we walked over to the research building on the EVA end of JABSOM. This is where the research laboratories are found. Dr. Abby Collier's laboratory is one of them. That's where we met Dean Jerris Hedges. He helped us put things in perspective on how the school is doing and where it's headed.
What is going on in terms of these grants? We've seen some grants in the newspapers, and I know that's the lifeblood of every educational institution. Tell me how the grants are going these days.
This week, in conjunction with Hilo, Manoa, and the principal investigator of the grant being here at the John A. Burns School of Medicine, a colleague of mine, Dr. Eric Holmes, is overseeing an EMBRI grant, which provides a pipeline for training scientists, not just at the University of Hawaii system campuses, but also for some of the smaller, more private colleges in the community. So that's been a great thing. And then, of course, we just heard word yesterday that...
This is hot copy now.
You're the first to hear it, that we've been awarded $12.6 million for 3 years to provide what's called a Clinical Translational Research Award that helps us consolidate some of our research infrastructure and to work with the community to help address health disparities. It's been a very good week.
But this all suggests, that's a sort of a connection with the community. It's kind of a new model for graduate schools and indeed for medical schools.
Well, about 15 to 20% of medical schools have this community-based nature to them. We probably have done it to a larger extent through attachments, not just here on the island of Oahu, but on our neighbor islands as well. The connections with the hospitals are very strong because in addition to rotating our trainees, we actually have our faculty have their offices and their clinical practices in these hospital sites. So we are very much integrated with the community, not only in clinical service delivery, but in terms of shared research activities and also the educational programs which are based at our community hospitals and clinics. We put a lot of time and effort into the selection of our students. They are not only selected because of their intellectual capacity, but they have great breadth of life experience, a lot of humanity, and a commitment to Hawaii.
So what about Asia? Are you reaching out? Do you think there's a future in reaching out to Asia and somehow connecting with medical establishments or doing telemedicine in Asia?
Well, we're very interested in collaborating in Asia. I was in Southeast China looking at some of their educational programs last October. I was in Okinawa just this last spring. And as we explore their needs and our needs, we find there are great similarities. And they are trying to push the envelope in terms of educational techniques as well. So we've established exchange programs, we've established outreach programs, and we're bringing in some of their students and faculty so they can learn both our techniques and technology.
What about the Cancer Research Center? That's coming soon. In fact, in October, there's a groundbreaking right next door to you.
Right. October 28th, we'll have a major groundbreaking. In fact, I believe the Board of Regents will be meeting here and taking part in that ceremony along with Senator Daniel Inouye. We're hoping that within a couple of years that facility will be built. It will greatly expand our research capacity, and the extension and collaboration that can take place between the cancer researchers and those affiliated in the medical school is tremendous.
Finally, we had a few minutes with Abby Collier herself, a PhD researcher who runs one of the laboratories in the research building. She's disarming. You'd hardly think she's a powerhouse principal investigator until you talk with her.
I'm a pharmacologist by training, and that means that I study drugs, and I teach the medical students clinical pharmacology. So I teach them how to prescribe, how to calculate doses, and I also teach the graduate students, some of my graduate students you've met, how to conduct science, but not just science. Pharmacology is a medical science.
I would have thought, actually, that the FDA would have examined these drugs beforehand to know exactly what kind of effect they had on the body. Are you saying that we need further research in that department?
Yeah. I think the way it works for the FDA is, until recently, drugs were generally tested in Caucasian males aged 18 to 60. And so the FDA has been very good in the last 10 years in saying you must test in women, you must test in children, you must test in the elderly. But it still is a developing science. And if you get a drug like morphine or acetaminophen, Tylenol, it's been around for 100 years. And so the tests aren't being done by drug companies because they're not going to make any money. And one of the things that we know is that very young children and pregnant women and older people, they have very different drug reactions. And so it's up to us.
Because, I mean, it's my impression that when you have one drug, then you have one set of reactions. When you have two drugs, you have 2+ set of reactions, and they react in ways that maybe you didn't realize when you were looking at only the one drug.
We teach our medical students about that. It's called polypharmacy, particularly if you get older people. We tell people your chance of having an adverse drug reaction doubles every time you take a second or a third drug. By the time you're taking 4 or 5 drugs, which is very common, especially for our older people, you're almost certain to have an adverse drug reaction at some point. What we need to do is the researchers need to understand clinical medicine, and the clinical practitioners need to understand where their drugs are coming from or how their diagnostic tests work, because that way we improve both sides.
Are you a PhD researcher?
I am a PhD
rather
researcher.
than an MD researcher?
I am a PhD researcher. My PhD is from a medical school, and my training is pharmacology and clinical pharmacology. So my training is a little different from most PhD researchers, because in order to receive my PhD, I had to do all the science courses and all the medicine courses.
It's more demanding.
Well, I think all PhDs are demanding.
Okay.
I think what it is for me is our training was very definitely, I guess the word that everybody uses is translational. I must understand the scientific method, but I must also understand the clinical medicine. And that's something we try and get across with our graduate students and our medical students is you have to understand both to make it better. You know, to develop a drug, you're no good to anybody if you don't understand how it's going to be in humans.
Where did you go to school?
My PhD is from the University of Auckland Medical School in New Zealand.
I knew that.
What a great tour. If you want to take a tour of JABSOM yourself, check with Tina Shelton at the school. She'll set you up. Beyond that, have you thought about applying for medical school? You might even get in. Become a doctor. Help yourself and help the people of Hawaii. See jabsom.hawaii.edu.
Moving right along, don't forget that on October 28th, ThinkTech and the Hawaii Venture Capital Association are presenting a luncheon panel program called Can There Be a Renaissance for Agriculture in Hawaii? It'll feature the chef of Kai Market at the Sheraton Waikiki, an executive from Whole Foods, a broker who sells farmland, and a very creative farmer from the Big Island. October 28th. Check it out on thinktechhawaii.com. ThinkTech is underwritten by some of our favorite local individuals and companies.
The Shidler Family Foundation. Jay Shidler, through the Shidler Family Foundation, is an active supporter of a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech Hawaii.
Hawaiian Electric Company, HECO and its affiliates MECO on Maui and HELCO on the Big Island, are deeply committed to supporting the communities it serves. We are very appreciative of their support.
Galen Ho. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company which has a large footprint and commitment to the community in Hawaii. We greatly appreciate Mr. Ho's support.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, HTDC, is a state agency organized in 1983 to facilitate the development of Hawaii's high-tech industry and thus to diversify our economy and provide quality jobs for our people. We appreciate HTDC's work and we are thankful for its generous support. That wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 throughout the week. For times, check out oc16.tv.
And for lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting opportunities, take a look at our site, thinktechhawaii.com.
I'm Jay Fidell. Thanks for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Duke Oishi. Aloha, everyone.